Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, our entire society as a liberal democracy and as a, what do we want to call it, capitalist society, really plays into discontentment, and I would say actually uses discontentment as a tool to accomplish its goals and purposes.
Hey, welcome to Whitefields Community Church Sermon Extra. Great to have you with us once again this week. I'm here with Pastor Cady, the pastor of Whitefields Community Church here in Longmont, Colorado. And we are in our series, Grace and Truth, as we've been looking at the book of 1 Corinthians, Paul's letter to 1 Corinthians. And this week we found ourselves in chapter 7, looking at verses 10 to the end of the chapter through
40.
40, yeah, 40, for 10 verse 40, yeah. And Bloom Where You're Planted is the title of this week's message. And if you missed that, whitefieldschurch.com. Get over there. You can download it on any of your favorite platforms as well. You can download it on our website. You can go to YouTube. You can go to Facebook, all those kind of places there. And if you're watching this video right now on YouTube, like and subscribe. Just give us a thumbs up and subscribe and share and interact with us. It's a great way of, getting this video to move up in the rankings and, even on your podcast apps. If you want to rate and review, give us a great review if you can. And that way, when people are asking questions about God and life and all these kind of things, that we can provide them with gospel-centered, Christ-centered content. And especially, questions that this week, as we discussed ideas of marriage and being content, bloom where you're planted, being content in that place that God has put you. And, we kind of wanted to talk a little bit more about that word, contentment, or discontentment for that matter, because it just seems that that's something that people are struggling with. In the sermon, it said only 14% of people in this one poll that was, I think it was 2020 or 2021, said they were happy. 14%, that is like a super low number if you just kind of, I was just thinking of all the people that were in the room, for the sermon, that, 14%, across that's not a very, very good number. So we just kind of thought about that word, discontentment. And, recently you just did a class on Christ and culture. And one of the things that we do in that class is that in order for us to see how the gospel can impact or best impact our society, our community that we live in, is one of the exercises that we do in the class is that we identify the idols of our particular community. And two of those idols, and I think pretty much everybody in the room agreed, two of those idols, quality of life and kind of that individualism. And we just kind of, thought about that and how those two things actually really play into the idea of being discontent.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it, our entire society as a liberal democracy and as a, what do we want to call it, capitalist society, really plays into discontentment, and I would say actually uses discontentment as a tool to accomplish its goals and purposes. For example, I mean, every political cycle that we go through, they're trying to stir up discontentment. I mean, even asking the question, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? Any of the questions they ask, in order to get elected, politicians are touching on these points and trying to kind of raise your sense of discontentment. When it comes to our economy, right? We have this biggest economy in the world, but our economy is fueled by discontentment, right? Like commercials all the time are focused on showing you what you're missing out on. Right? We even have this term, FOMO, right? Fear of missing out. And that's what all of marketing is essentially geared towards, is this idea of, are you missing out on something? And what is it? And, let's make you, obsessed with getting the next thing. And so, I mean, even if you think about it, with this latest iPhone, I was thinking about it a lot because a lot of the things I've been reading out there say, it's not a huge upgrade from what was before. And yet there's all this marketing, saying, really pushing this product on people. And I mean, it's just the way that our society works. We have a lot of marketing because it's a capitalist society. All that to say, you're asking what are the idols of the Front Range of Colorado? I would say, individualism. I think this is the most individualistic part of the most individualistic society that has ever existed in all of history. I think more so than even the West Coast. I think the Mountain West. I would loop into that like New Mexico, Arizona, Utah, Idaho, Wyoming, Montana, and Colorado. And I would say that this area is ruggedly individualistic. That's part of the reason why people move here. It's for the quality of life, right? And it's that idea of, I don't want to miss out. There's so many things to do. I want to enjoy things. I want to experience this. And so you come here wanting to have that quality of life. But it just fuels that sense of, kind of self-fulfillment. And I think the individualism thing too. I mean, you can say that, what happens with the individualism piece, which is so ironic, is that I would say one of the characteristic features of where we live is loneliness. So on the one hand, extreme individualism, but it breeds loneliness. I think this is one of the most lonely societies that I've ever experienced or seen. It was interesting. I grew up here. I didn't realize it, but stepping out of it for a while and then coming back, I just see it with new eyes. And I think that's a really big thing. So all that to say, contentment, why does it matter? And is there such a thing as a good sense of discontentment? I would say on the sense of discontentment piece, there absolutely is a good and healthy sense of discontentment that can exist. And that is where you're not complacent, right? You're not just happy you're not just, just fine not making any progress. You're wanting to make progress. I think that's good because, as we talked about earlier in this series, we talk about that in the Bible. Like Paul says, I'm here for your progress in the faith. I want you to be moving forward. I don't want you to stay as a baby. I want you to progress and grow. Now, on the other hand, contentment, why does it matter? Well, because it expresses faith in God's sovereignty and in God's purpose. I think about Paul the Apostle. He says, I am who I am by the grace of God. I think that we should also be able to say, I am where I am in life by the grace of God. And that doesn't mean that you're never going to try to be in a different situation. Even in the text, he talks to slaves and says, hey, if you can get free, you should do it. But he also says, okay, in this moment where God has you, understand he has you here for a purpose. That purpose is both for you to grow as a result of this situation, and he wants to use you in a special and unique way right here, right now.
Yeah, and that just goes back to the title of the sermon, Bloom Where You're Planted. And interestingly enough, one of the other options you had for the sermon was the idea of plow the field that you're in, and both meaning, bloom where you're planted, there's this idea of you, as you've said, the idea of growth. You're growing, mm-hmm. and also the Bible, that idea of plowing the field that you're in, meaning you're putting the work in, you're changing, you're changing your environment, and instead of letting your environment, affect you and to change you, and I think that's an important part of that, idea of discontentment and contentment working together. I'm here, but I want to make this place better by the power of the Spirit, and letting God use me. That's kind of our, should be our mindset. But I also thought, you think about the idea of discontentment. We're sojourners. We're on a journey. This place is not our home. So there is going to be that sense of discontentment that we're missing something, and that something, of course, is provided to us through the gospel. And at the end of that road is Jesus, heaven, and eternal community with Him. And that, of course, is going to breed a sense of discontentment because we're looking forward to His return. But in the midst of that, God says, I've planted you here, and I have work for you to do, and I have things, people that I want you to affect. It's almost the opposite of being selfish. It's being, the outworking of God's grace, that in your life and in affecting other people that you come into contact with, in that society that God has planted you. Yeah. So I just thought about my, I thought of my father-in-law. He's since gone on to be with the Lord, and But I always thought about him as somebody when I was living in Hungary, and he was a man who worked very, very hard in Romania under communism. And I just always had this sense that he was just very content, and in many ways, I was like, man, you're missing out, But he would go work the fields, and he would go work at the bakery, and he would come home. He just loved his soup and his meat, and then he'd go work on his bike. And I'm like, we got some great motorcycles in the West, but he loved that bike. He loved working on it, and he just seemed to love life in this small little Romanian town where, an outsider from the West would be see, man, you're just missing out on everything. I mean, all the stuff that we have in the West that can make your life better. And I don't think I ever saw anybody more content than he was in the place he was. He had his family, he had his church, he had his friends, he had his bike, he had his job, he had his soup, those things were the things that just kind of made him happy. And it really something that really impacted me, in when I lived over there, because there's a sense when you come from the West and you go to Eastern Europe that you can feel like there are things that are missing, those conveniences, the choices. We were talking about that earlier today was, one of the things about, communist Russia, or you go into a store and there are two things to choose from, maybe one thing, and the rest of the store is, the shelves are empty, and that was a common problem there, trying to keep things stocked. It's like, and you come here to the States and you walk into a Walmart or someplace like that, and there's 1,500,000, whatever, boxes of cereal to choose from, and it's just like, well, what if I pick that one? Or, it's just like you get this, it creates an anxiety where there's no anxiety there. There's one thing on the shelf. Okay, I guess I'm buying that. It kind of gives you so much more time in life to do things that are important when some of these other decisions are kind of wrestle. We spend so much time choosing, what restaurant to go to, what we're going to do, this and that, and where, many of those folks, they got one thing to choose from, one restaurant. There's one restaurant in town, And it just kind of that so that's something that really impacted me was just his example for the idea of just what it means to be content in life. And, that's kind of a lesson. I think it's just something we should take to heart as we think about at chapter 7 of what Paul was saying. Just wherever you are, let the Lord use you and be content in that. And I think that's the lesson for us. And that's just something we can think about this week. And it's just as Pastor Nick pointed out. Our whole commerce, our whole society is driven and to us, needing something more. That FOMO, fear of missing out. I just need that one thing, and we all get caught up in it, and it's just something. Sometimes we just need to lay all that before the Lord. Maybe that's something you have to do this week. Just think about that and think on those things that maybe are driving your decision making, where maybe that energy needs to be put someplace, where the Lord can actually use it. So hey, let us know what you think. It's an important topic. I think especially nowadays, something very important for us to think about. So it was great having you with us this week. WhitefieldSchurch.com if you missed the sermon, and we'll see you next week. God bless.